I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods, yeah. One in particular, I'm just a messenger, let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Monday and we are back looking at AFC quarterback rooms. We'll be looking at the bottom half of our AFC list today. The schedule release, Dennis, is coming out on Wednesday, the full release, but they started leaking some things today. The international games will get mentioned tomorrow, but a couple of the big games that they have announced already. The opening night game is going to be the Dallas Cowboys at the Philadelphia Eagles. We've also seen that NBC is going to have the Saturday, December 27th games on Peacock. There's going to be a Saturday doubleheader on December 20th as well. The Black Friday game this year is going to be the Chicago Bears at the Philadelphia Eagles. And then Christmas night, it's a Christmas triple header. They haven't announced the Netflix games that I've seen so far, but the Christmas night game will be Kansas City hosting Denver. So a couple of the game announcements coming out. Any of them pique your interest?
It's May, man.
Look, this is the excitement.
Shouldn't we be using air quotes when we say leaked? You know, I don't know. It feels like they're just kind of dribbling them out like the NFL does. They want to keep people talking. They've got the actual date. There will be a big show about it. But
well, they said today it was each of the broadcast partners gets to make one strategic announcement as part of like the full week rollout. But I'm with you. It's basically them. So the Saturday, December 20th games, in case you're curious, Green Bay at Chicago. Chicago getting a few primetime games. It's like Ben Johnson went there or something. And exactly. Philadelphia at Washington. They haven't posted I thought I saw the December 27th game, but I don't see it popping up yet. They may just not have gotten to it. But, you know, any football news is welcome football news for me at this point in time.
Hey, well, you know, your favorite sleeper's been knocking them dead at rookie minicamp.
Who's that?
Whoever, just pick one.
Oh, yeah. That's true. Okay, not schedule release news piques my interest. The constant flow of rookie minicamp. You know, in the span of 3 hours, I saw that Dylan Gabriel's too short, that Dylan Gabriel is a commanding presence on the field, and that Dylan Gabriel is such an embarrassment that Cleveland Browns fans are threatening to set the building on fire. So whatever your Dylan Gabriel take is, you're welcome to it. Also, saw a fun story that there's a video of Shedeur Sanders meeting with the Giants that he apparently tanked, and that Cleveland and the NFL have threatened legal action if the Giants leak the footage. Makes me want to see it. It's like whenever a group tries to ban a film or tell you to boycott a film, makes me want to go out and watch it. So, but
yeah, no, I'm sure the Shedeur Sanders. You had to know what you were getting into meeting with him. And you had to know that there was going to be a aura, a sense of who he wants to play for and who he doesn't.
Well,
And
he wanted to play for the Giants, though. He got those specialty cleats.
and with that, I think with him, for better or worse, there comes a sense of entitlement that maybe it's not him that is causing it. It's probably Dion, but he can't shake that. And it is what it is. I think he would have loved to be in the New York market, especially as the third pick. But now he's got to go out. He seems to be doing all the right things in Cleveland. The video of him going to the high school and doing that stuff. And unfortunately, because of who Dion is, he's going to get a little bit of a raw deal. He's going to have to overperform in the humility department because of Deion Sanders. And that's not really fair to him. But if he goes out there and does what he's supposed to on the field and in the locker room, people are going to forget that soon enough. We see last pick in the draft, supposed to be going to get $50 million a year. Tom Brady, 6th rounder, made $1 bajillion. You just got to get in the door, and then you got to take care of business. And we see it with players all the time. What is it? You hear the story. Mike Piazza was a 72nd round draft pick as a favor Tommy Lasorda did to Piazza's dad. And he went on to be a Hall of Fame catcher. Well, Hall of Fame hitter. He was just a mediocre catcher, but
How dare you?
It's just there's a lot of baggage, that comes with being in the spotlight. Some people stand up to it and do great. Baker Mayfield is a great example. He was a very high, the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah.
And, I was like, oh, look, he's killing it in these commercials. He's going to be great for Cleveland. He had a roller coaster ride in Cleveland, 3 teams in 3 years, and he finally gets to Tampa and shakes it out. I thought he was hilarious in the commercials. I don't think the commercials are why he played bad in Cleveland. I think Cleveland being a bad organization had something to do with it. They're getting better. And we just have to, I think we got to give the kids some room to breathe. Maybe Tyler Shook doesn't get as much room to breathe because he's, my age, but you let some of these things, don't get wrapped up in some of that news. The Browns, if I had to put money down today on who's the opening day starter, I'm going with Kenny Pickett.
No, we'll talk about their room in a minute here. One other piece of news, Derek Carr, we had there had been reports he was hurt. Would he miss the season? What were they going to do? Obviously, the Saints moved up and took Tyler Shook. We talked about that when we talked about the Saints quarterback room, which both of us had kind of down at the bottom because we were thinking Carr was going to miss some time. He's going to miss all the time. He decided to step away and retire. So the Saints officially moving forward with Shook, Rattler, and Hayner as a 3-way competition, according to Kellen Moore. I kind of think it's a competition to put them in position to take a shot at Arch Manning. The symmetry there would be too perfect, trying to get, Archie's grandson on the team he played for. But what, I always thought Carr was a pretty solid and underrated quarterback, especially for fantasy. He had some very, productive. He was a QB2, but he was a very solid and reliable QB2 for a lot of years with some pretty mediocre Raiders teams. And even when he was out there for the Saints, put up some decent numbers. I would not suspect he's in Hall of Fame consideration. But how will you remember Derek Carr?
I mean, he was a good quarterback and, not great. Probably wasn't going to win you a lot of weeks, but there were going to be some weeks where if he was your QB2, he might put you over the edge. It feels like, I was honestly, I was surprised because I felt like when it came to raw talent, I thought David Carr was a far superior quarterback. But the statistics, I mean, Derek Carr just put up so much better numbers, in part because David got beat up, as an expansion draft pick, and it ended up he spent about the same amount of time, I think a couple years less in the NFL, but he spent a lot of it as a backup after he just got brutalized in Houston. I mean, it
Yeah.
was rough for him.
So I think I saw a statistic that Carr would finish as the only quarterback with more than 40,000 passing yards and no playoff wins. Could be owing to he was never really on a good team. Career record 77 and 92. Did have a couple. His best season, he led the Raiders to a 12-3 record and broke his leg as they were going into the playoffs. Had a 10-7 season in 21 with the Raiders. They made the playoffs, but they didn't win. 9-8 his first year in New Orleans. I think they just missed. Overall stats: 41,245 yards, 257 touchdowns, only 112 interceptions. Wasn't a spectacular runner. Sacked 303 times, which kind of speaks to lack of probably protection. His career rushing yards 956 and 7 touchdowns, so not a huge rushing threat, but those are pretty good touchdown to interception numbers. 41,000 passing yards in 11 professional seasons, pretty solid.
Yeah, he's a guy that he wasn't an elevator. He wasn't going to take a mediocre team and make it really good. But if you had a really good team, he was probably not going to cost you. Game manager plus. I think he thought a little more of himself than that, but excuse me,
So 28 fourth quarter comebacks in 11 years. That's pretty good. None with the Saints, kind of an interesting. All 28 of those were when he was with the Raiders.
So I don't know. I hope his shoulder heals up and he can have a nice career playing in the backyard with the kids.
Yeah.
The Saints.
And he seems content to step away. So
yeah, and you talk about Arch. There's a lot of talk that Arch isn't coming out next year. Now,
but he might.
Would he change his mind if the Saints had the number 1 pick?
Yeah.
I think it would depend on what kind of year he has this year.
Yeah. Well, because it would also depend on what they want him to be the number 1 pick. So, well, let's dive into quarterback rooms. We're going to the AFC. We are going to be doing 16-9. There is a lot more symmetry for us on this list. So I feel
like these last 3 teams here should be tied for 17th.
I mean, I have a reason that I mean, not a huge reason, but a minor reason at least that I ordered them. So I'm going to take them one at a time and I'll read them off and we can talk about why we have them there. Both of us have the Cleveland Browns at number 16. If we were doing all 32 teams together, for me, they would probably be 31 because I think I would still have the Saints at the bottom of the list. But the depth chart currently, Deshaun Watson's still there. They put Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah on season-ending PUP today. I still think they're going to end up doing that with Watson, but we'll see. They re-signed Joe Flacco, who was kind of was 2023 comeback player of the year for them. They traded for Kenny Pickett, who was with Pittsburgh, spent last year with Philadelphia. They used a 3rd-round pick on Dylan Gabriel and a 5th-round pick on Shedeur Sanders. The reason I have them down there, they have a lot of options, a lot of unknown quantities. How much has Kenny Pickett learned, grown, and improved in his time behind Jalen Hurts? He looked okay when he came in spots for the Eagles, but then he got hurt kind of right away. I don't think we saw enough of a sample size for me personally to know how much different he is than he was in Pittsburgh. Joe Flacco was incredible for the Browns in 23. It looked incredibly pedestrian for the Colts last year. How much has he got left? And Gabriel and Sanders feel like complete unknowns. The only thing we know for sure, in my opinion, is that they would rather not have Deshaun Watson see the field this year. So I think you kind of rule him out of the mix. But you said you were putting your money on Kenny Pickett to start day one. I was kind of leaning Joe Flacco, but I think it's either going to be Flacco or Pickett. I don't think it's going to be one of the rookies because I think the Browns think the rest of their roster, and probably aren't wrong, the rest of their roster is good enough to compete. But this is a gaping hole to me.
Yeah, it's tough because it feels to me like one of these quarterbacks is going to be out, not including Watson, who I don't see him. I'm not sure he plays another down in the NFL, let alone for the Browns.
No, but I don't think they'll release him because they don't want to eat the dead cap hit. I just think I was surprised he didn't go on season-ending PUP today. We've seen a few players get put on the season-ending PUP, and it's an easy.
Right.
The fact the Browns put a player on season-ending PUP and it wasn't Watson was the shock to me.
So I think that they want to figure out how to keep all four quarterbacks, because I don't think they want to expose Gabriel or Sanders on the practice squad for somebody else to sign. And I don't know that they can afford to eat up 4 roster spots with quarterbacks. But I also don't think they want to go into the season with Flacco and 2 rookies or Pickett and 2 rookies. Now, we saw the Browns a couple years ago when they felt good about things. They traded a veteran backup away in Josh Dobbs. Turns out they shouldn't have felt good about things. But so what do we do here? I agree. There's a lot of options, and none of them feel like they're great. Is one of the rookies gonna, is one of them gonna have a Brock Purdy breakout? Is Davis Mills in there? Dylan Gabriel played a ton of games. Now, I don't know.
Do they end up trading one of the? I think you had floated this before, trading one of the veterans to a team that maybe doesn't have a good backup situation. And I'm with you. I don't think they could really afford to release one of the rookies and not have them get picked up unless someone goes out and looks completely out of their depth.
Yeah, I think both of these rookies are better than Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who's
not on the team. Fortunately, that's the Eagles'
but
problem.
But he was a couple years ago, and they had to play him when they decided to trade away Dobbs, and it wasn't great, Bob.
But I mean, it would be probably an NFC team to me. One of the things that I took away from looking down the AFC QB charts as opposed to the NFC, which we did first, is in general I felt better about depth and backup situations for all these teams than for several of the teams. Like Tampa Bay, if they think they can seriously make a run, may be better served getting a Flacco or a Pickett than Kyle Trask.
Yeah, if I'm the Browns, I think I wanna keep because he's younger, and that offense doesn't ask a ton of the quarterback right now, and unfortunately, they don't have Nick Chubb anymore. But they've got Jerome Ford. They drafted Quinshon Judkins. They've got Dylan Sampson, and Pierre Strong has become probably the best number 4 running back in the AFC. Now, I don't know how far that gets you. It's not far, but Cleveland, like I said, I think they're going to start Pickett. I do think they want to try to figure out a way to stash one of the rookies, keep one of them on the roster, and keep Flacco. because I don't think they're 100% sold on Pickett. But I also, if I had to guess, I don't know that they're 100% sold on a 41-year-old Joe Flacco going 17 games either. And so having the thought of having a flamed out Kenny Pickett trying to rebuild that, we're not necessarily sure has what it takes to be a starting NFL quarterback with two rookies behind him, or a 40-something-year-old Joe Flacco.
So Flacco is 40 years old. In 2023, he started 5 games for the Browns, went 4-1, threw for 1,616 yards, only completed 60% of his passes, 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Last year, he started 6 games. They only went 2-4, but he completed 65% of his passes, 1,761 yardage, 12 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. So he wasn't as far off, I guess, as the magic we remember from the end of the year prior. So probably probably something similar, but that isn't incredibly inspiring either.
No. But again, that offense isn't calling for, I don't think they're looking for an elevator. I think they're going to play defense, and they're going to try to control the clock a little bit. It doesn't matter, I think, if it's Pickens or Flacco. I do think there's going to be a lot of ball control type of offense.
What's funny? For as much as we were down on him last year, he tied his career best completion percentage last season.
Flacco did?
Yeah. And ironically, the only other year he achieved 65% completion percentage was his 2-6 in 8 starts for the Denver Broncos.
Well, and let's get him in. Let's get him in there throwing 60% completion bombs.
Yeah, maybe the worse he does, the better your team does, because he had 2 years in Baltimore 3 years in Baltimore where he was sub 60, and they were all winning seasons. So, all right. So number 15, we both have the Pittsburgh Steelers, and honestly, if you were to say you thought Pittsburgh was worse, I don't know that I'd have a strong argument against you. Their quarterback depth chart right now: Mason Rudolph currently penciled in at starter. Will Howard, fresh off winning a national title for Ohio State, is on the roster, was a 6th-round pick, and they picked up Skylar Thompson, who was the 3rd emergency quarterback for a number of years for Miami, but did actually make some regular season and a playoff start in one of those years where they lost Tua. I have them slightly ahead because Mason Rudolph, while nobody's idea of impressive, is 8-4-1 in his career as a Steelers starter. We saw him go 5-3 in a meaningful stretch of starts for the Steelers a few years ago. 2023, he finished 3-0 in the last 3 games as a starter and helped get them into the playoffs. Didn't have great success with Tennessee last year, but looked better than Will Levis. I know that is a low bar. They say they're comfortable with him. I feel like you're comfortable with him in the sense that you're comfortable paying taxes because you're required to.
Right.
But
somebody's got to be the starter.
We have to factor them without Aaron Rodgers. Honestly, if they had Aaron Rodgers, I probably would only put them over the team I have. Only like 1 or 2 teams in front of them. I'm not sure that that's a huge elevation. I felt a little bit better about this room than Cleveland's room. Not much for me, though.
I mean, I basically consider, without Rodgers, I consider them to be tied, in part because Cleveland just has a larger volume of mediocrity. And so, it's like the lottery. The more tickets you have, the easier it is to win. And so if you got 4 quarterbacks versus 3 quarterbacks, you got, 33% more chance one of them can be serviceable. Fun fact, Skylar Thompson and Will Howard were teammates at Kansas State.
Well, and I actually think you and I liked the landing spot of Will Howard to that team more than we were in on Gabriel or Sanders to Cleveland. And maybe it's the circus that whole situation has become, because we both had Sanders higher than Will Howard pre-draft. And I think I still have him a couple spots higher in my rookie rankings, but I just like Will Howard's situation better. I thought that could be a nice fit for him to be, a backup, maybe end up coming in and playing. It feels inexplicable now because there's I don't have a strong justification for it. I just like where he landed better, I guess.
Right. Now, I'm a big Will Howard fan. His biggest knock to me is that he's got to see it and throw it. He hasn't demonstrated a lot of anticipatory throwing. I keep referring to the first half of the Texas game in the national championship run. He had some nice tight window anticipatory throws in the first half of that game, but it didn't even carry on throughout the game. In the second half, some of it wasn't there. I think Howard has a good enough arm. He's got plus mobility. He's big. He's like he profiles to me a little bit like Big Ben, but not quite. He's not as refined as a passer. But then if you remember when Ben came into the league, he wasn't a great passer. Like I think that first Super Bowl they went to, he was like 9 for 27 or something in the Super Bowl that year, that early in his career. But I like the potential of Will Howard. The more we see high-end quarterbacks faceplant, the more I keep saying to myself, we need to go back to, it doesn't matter if you're a top 3 pick or not. Ride the pine for a year. Learn how to be an NFL player. And I think because the salary cap, or the way they're slotting rookies, we're seeing a little bit more of it. But it's much rarer, I think, to see a Jaden Daniels come in and be successful. I think we see more, the Baker Mayfields and the Sam Darnolds, the guys that come in and we think they're going to be good, but they need some time. They just aren't quite up to it in year one. Mason Rudolph, seasoned vet. He's been around. I want to say he's seen a lot in the NFL, but he hasn't really played that many games. I think he's going into his 8th year now. So I'd like to see him. Honestly, I don't want Rodgers to come. Let's get it over. And I roster him. I've got a couple shares of him, and I'm just like, in those leagues, I'm actively trying to trade for Mason Rudolph just to hedge my bets. But no, I think I like. I debated about switching these two teams, but it felt like I was just doing it so they would be different on our list, because I think they're equally as bad. To me, they're literally tied.
Yeah, and not much of a step up. At 14, we both have the Indianapolis Colts, which is kind of a mighty fall. They have Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones on the roster. They drafted Riley Leonard out of Notre Dame in the 6th round, and they have currently Jason Bean, but I would suspect he's probably the one that won't make the final. I mean, they may only carry 2 quarterbacks, and this is a mighty fall. Even last year, we had a lot higher hopes for Anthony Richardson because we got a little glimmer of him in like 2.5 games as a rookie, but saw him make 11 starts last year. 6-5 record is not heinous, but 47.7 completion percentage, 14 on the yardage, less than 2,000 yards in 11 games is not great, Bob. 8 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, also had 9 fumbles, only sacked 14 times. That's probably owing to his mobility. He did rush for 499 yards and 6 touchdowns, but still 21 turnovers in 11 starts is not great. And to be his primary competition, they brought in Daniel Jones, who had a really strong 2022 under Brian Dable, was off to a poor start in 23 before he got injured, and then started 10 games last year before being released, was 2-8 in those starts. 63% completion, a little over 2,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, only 7 interceptions, only had 4 fumbles, but he takes a boatload of sacks, took 29 sacks in 10 games, an average of 2.9 per game, which you'd say is bad, except for that he took 30 in 6 games last year, which is an average of 5 a game. So I don't, Nick Bakay used to do a thing where he would talk about a competition and then he would end by saying there are no winners here. And for me, that's why Indianapolis is at 14, because this is the competition. Colts fans have to be just slamming their head against the desk. You have an incredible set of young and up-and-coming receivers. You have a great rookie tight end. You have a great running back in Jonathan Taylor. Their offensive line has taken some hits, but they've worked on improving the defense. But another team that, aside from the quarterback position, would almost feel like a playoff contender.
So you know what the Colts need? Mason Rudolph. I mean,
that probably would. Honestly, that
it just feels like
stabilized them.
Exactly. He's not going to be as erratic. I think he's got better pocket presence than Daniel Jones, and that's why Jones takes so many sacks. He just doesn't feel the pressure. I think the reason I have the Colts above the other two, I still have a little bit of hope because of Richardson's raw potential. And we've seen Daniel Jones be okay. I don't think, I think Jones is in the, playing for a contract every year phase of his career now. The way he rebounded that first year with Dayball, it just felt like, man, he was figuring it out. I don't know what happened after the injury that second year, though, and then to come in and play as bad as he did last year. I don't know. It was just it's just a tough situation. Riley Leonard comes into the NFL with an extremely, just focused dog kind of mentality, but he just doesn't have the arm. They just replaced Sam Ehlinger with Riley Leonard. They're basically the same guy. They're good athletes. They're going to run. They're going to mentally probably make the right decisions. They just can't throw the ball for shit. And Leonard doesn't have an NFL arm. And I'll be honest, I don't even know who the other guy is. And I consider myself to be pretty savvy when it comes to depth charts, but I never heard of the guy. Is he a CFL signee?
He was a college free agent signed last year. He played North Texas.
With Nick Nolte and Mac Davis?
I guess. Oh, and Kansas.
Oh.
North Texas and Kansas. He was signed last year as a college free agent. So
but yeah, I mean, the Colts get the edge, like I said, because I still get. I feel like Richardson has potential still.
He played 3 years at Kansas. Jason Bean started 35 games, but I don't think Kansas is a big passing team, and maybe he didn't start all these games. Only 517 pass attempts in 3 years doesn't strike me as incredible.
Yeah, that's not a lot of pass attempts.
Okay, well, at 13, we start to diverge a little bit as we wrap this up. So your number 13, you went with the Tennessee Titans, and they have on their on their list, they have Cam Ward, obviously the number 1 overall pick, Will Levis, who was a second-round pick in 23 and started a lot of games for them the last couple of years. And then they added unrestricted free agent journeyman Brandon Allen and your boy Tim Boyle. I would wager not all 4 of those guys make it onto the season. I think it's probably Boyle and Allen fighting for that veteran spot at the end.
Yeah, and with the practice squad rules like they are, those 2 guys feel like they're going to pass through waivers and go to the practice squad as the emergency 4th quarterback, unlike, Shedeur or Dylan Gabriel. I'm hopeful Ward can rise to the potential of the number 1 overall pick. They've got a decent backfield group with Pollard and Spears. Chigo Okonkwo has been good in stretches. They've invested some in the offensive line over the last 2 or 3 drafts. Calvin Ridley, he's still living a little bit on reputation, but he's been solid, if not spectacular. Treylon Burks has been a miserable failure. They did sign Tyler Lockett, who I think still has something left in the tank. They got somebody else there. I can't remember who, but that I should remember.
In receiver, they have Calvin Ridley, Tyler Lockett, Treylon Burks. I think that was pretty much. They drafted Shamir Daiki and
Aleke Omenor.
Yeah.
Oh, Van Jefferson. That's who I keep forgetting there. No wonder.
Van Jefferson.
So it really, to me, it feels like the third receiver group is basically can Chimere or DK and Iomenor overtake Van Jefferson. I think they're just waiting for Treylon Burks' contract to expire. They did draft Gunnar Helm at tight end. He's a pretty good receiving tight end out of Texas, and he's listed as the 3rd. So they have a little bit of receiving. Okonkwo, like I said, has flashed. So there are some weapons. J.C. Latham was a 1st-round draft pick in 24. They signed Dan Moore for left tackle as to shore up that spot. And Skoronski was a 1st-rounder in 23. Then they brought over Kevin Zeitler from Detroit. Detroit was one of the better offensive lines the last few years. So it seems to line up for Ward to not have to do too much. He's got to be more accurate than Will Levis, which I got to be honest, I think even Anthony Richardson might give Levis a run for his money in the accuracy department. I like Cam Ward. I think he's a good story. He has went through some adversity starting, we love to talk about the 0-star recruit starting at our mother of golden retriever or whatever college. I always forget what Incarnate Word. Is that what it was?
For who? Oh,
Cam Ward.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Incarnate Word. Then Washington. So I think that the challenges he's had through 5 years of college are going to suit him well to translate, to adjust to the NFL. I could see them taking a nice rise next year if he plays well, doesn't get injured. He doesn't have to elevate them to, a 10-7 record. But if they go 7-10 or 6-11, I think that as long as he's showing progress throughout the year, I think I would be hopeful for next year with him.
So Will Levis, 12 starts, 63.1% completion, 11 starts for Anthony Richardson, 47.7% completion. So you probably lose that pretty bad.
All right. You're a writer. You're an editor. Surely you recognize hyperbole.
No, I thought they could be reasonably close too. I'm honestly a little surprised Levis had that good of a completion percentage. He also took 41 sacks in 12 starts, which we call them Daniel Jones numbers. So Will Levis and Anthony Richardson might be a on par of a quarterback competition with what they're getting right now. My number 13, I went with the Jacksonville Jaguars on the roster. Trevor Lawrence, former number 1 overall pick. They signed journeyman Nick Mullins to be a backup. They have John Wolford, and they got college free agent Seth Hennigan also filling things out. And I'll be honest, part of the reason I'm down on the Jaguars is Trevor Lawrence is now another new coach, another new system to try to fix him. He had one probably fairly decent season in 2023 where it looked like he was turning or in 2022, excuse me, where it looked like he was turning things around. But in 2023, to end the year, really struggled. I don't know, people might have forgotten, but the Jaguars were 8-2 and finished 8-8, and Trevor Lawrence became like a turnover machine down the stretch. Last year was struggling even worse. Only a 60% completion percentage in 10 starts. They went 2-8, had 11 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Took a fair number of sacks. He's also not giving you a lot of rushing upside. He only has 1,083 career rushing yards in 4 seasons, and he's coming off a pretty big injury that knocked him out. So he's kind of coming off that injury, new coach, new system. Makes me a little bit nervous. He's never really lived up to some of the hype we thought there was when he was coming in. Only a 63% completion percentage overall in his career, only 69 touchdowns in 60 games, 46 interceptions in those 60 games. That's not incredible numbers for a guy who was once taken first overall. And behind him, we have Nick Mullins, who throughout his career has essentially thrown a lot of YOLO balls. He's like a very poor man's Jameis Winston without that level of success. So it is not a room that greatly inspires me. And when I was looking at some of the other options, I just felt more comfortable with some of the other rooms. At my 12, I have Tennessee, who you had at 13. I guess it's the potential of Cam Ward that I like a little bit more. I have more questions about Trevor Lawrence right now entering year 5 and more maybe excitement for Cam Ward. I think both of them are offenses that might be a little bit of a work in progress. So that was probably the difference for me. But at your 12, you went with the New York Jets. They signed Justin Fields as projected to be their starter. They still have Tyrod Taylor. Jordan Travis retired, but they still have college free agent Adrian Martinez, and they signed college free agent Brady Cook. I would guess one of those guys maybe is kept, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Jets only keep the 2.
Yeah, I think when you have a veteran like Tyrod Taylor, I think you can afford to carry just 2. Probably it wouldn't surprise me if they put both of the other guys on their practice squad. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how Tanner Eggstrom is the first-time offensive coordinator there. He worked with Ben Johnson in Detroit, and they've got an awesome stable of running backs with Breece Hall and Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis, I believe it is.
Yep.
Feels like they drafted or signed somebody else too. They've got some opportunity.
They have Kenny Nwangawu, and they signed Donovan Edwards and Zach Evans.
Yeah. The Edwards was the one I was thinking. So you've got Garrett Wilson, and hopefully there's some ability to rekindle the connection that they had for the 1 year in college. They played together 2 years. 1 year was really productive for Fields and Wilson. Mostly, I want to see the offensive coordinator just build an offense that suits Justin Fields' skill set. Can you do that in the NFL? I mean, it seems like Greg Roman is the only one that's ever been able to do it. Like, they went from Joe Flacco to Lamar Jackson mid-season and didn't seem to miss a beat. It was amazing. And nobody else has really been able to say, oh, hey, we've got this elite athlete quarterback that's a mediocre passer. He's got some limitations. He's a see it, has to throw it. He's got a big arm, but isn't always accurate. What can we get out of him? You know, what does he need on the receiving end to be productive? Well, you know, they've got didn't they draft a tight end too?
The Jets, they drafted Mason Taylor.
There's talk, you know, he's 20 years old. He's going to come in and step right into the starting role. I'll say I'm a little skeptical. He may be the starter within a year. But I think, you know, Ruckert and who's their other tight end?
I think that's pretty much it because their starter was
Kenny Yeboah, I think maybe. Those guys are going to end up, you know, kind of leading the way at tight end. I think Taylor is going to be a fine tight end, but really comes down to, will Eggstrom tailor the offense to Justin Fields' skill set? If he does, Fields potentially could throw for, 3,500 yards.
They have Stone Smart, Kenny Yeboah no longer on the Stone Smart and Zach Kuntz.
So if Fields can throw for 3,500 and rush for 9, I think that puts him in a great position to be productive as a team. I think that still opens the gates for Breece Hall to have a good season, Garrett Wilson to have a good season. It provides a narrow funnel for fantasy. But as much as I am pulling for Justin Fields because he's a Buckeye, we've never really seen it consistently out of him. He's been real good for fantasy at times, but being good for fantasy doesn't keep you in the NFL. So you have to be good for the NFL too.
So you're number 11. You have the Miami Dolphins. They have Tua Tagovailoa. They signed Zach Wilson to be their backup after a year in Denver, and they drafted Quinn Ewers.
So the biggest ding here is Tua's injury potential. I looked for every reason in the world to have them up in the 7 or 8 range. Because when he's healthy and that team is on, that team is just about unstoppable with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Jonnu Smith and Devon Achane. They can be virtually unstoppable on offense. But you don't know when his last game is coming. And I think we're all a little gun shy. And you don't want to ever say somebody's injury prone, because I think that term gets thrown around and it isn't necessarily accurate. But he's a guy that has a particular type of injury that he has to take certain precautions to do what he can to avoid it. And to me, that takes his mind off of what he needs to execute when it comes to the plays. Now, if they're clicking, everything is so quick. They're getting it. They don't do a lot of, deep throws. It's a lot of, short to mid crossing routes, getting open quickly with Waddle and Hill. They can be super productive. I could see that offense, that quarterback room being top 5 if everything's going good. That being said, that doesn't include Zach Wilson playing a lot of games. He's, he just has never seemed to develop the presence to be a quarterback. He's got Daniel Jones level pocket presence. Doesn't do a great job of knowing what's going on around him and where the pressure's coming from. Great arm, can sling it downfield. But sometimes because of the pressure, he's just chucking it up there. And honestly, I think Quinn Ewers is probably more similar to Tua in play style. He doesn't have the biggest arm. He's not the biggest guy. We'll have to see if he puts that 7th round chip on his shoulder and goes out and just starts doing work, and makes himself into, a Brock Purdy-esque NFL caliber quarterback. But ultimately, being ranked number 11 for me is on the shoulders of Tua in his injury history.
Yeah, and 11 for me is the team that you had at 12. I have the Jets. Justin Fields. I think it's his potential that puts him there. My 11 and 10 are teams and 9. My last 3 here were teams I had a little bit of a tough time ranking because I think there's potential, but there's also pitfalls. Justin Fields has potential. We've seen it in flashes. We saw it in flashes a little bit when he started for Pittsburgh last year. We saw it from time to time in Chicago. Hasn't been wildly successful. He started 44 games, only 14-30 as a starter. Not incredible numbers, although his completion percentage has gotten better each of his 4 years in the league. His touchdown to interception ratio has gotten better each of his 4 years in the league. That is encouraging, and that includes with Pittsburgh, where he had career high completion percentage, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception in the games that he started. He has some talent. The Jets maybe have some potential in there. And then behind him, a consummate veteran in Tyrod Taylor, who, probably isn't blowing you away, especially at this stage of the game, but is a very solid NFL backup. At 10 for me, I have the team that you had at 11, and that is the Miami Dolphins. And it's indeed, I share your concern. If we knew Tua was 100% healthy and good to go, I probably would have them higher, because in 2023, when he played the whole season, he was quarterback 9, and they looked great. But there is some dysfunction that's seemingly creeping into Miami. You mentioned Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle out there and going well. They've taken turns not being healthy and or being on the path toward Antonio Brown-dom, and not in the good way. So there are definitely some questions there. I did like the addition of Johnny Smith, but Tua feels like he is one major hit away from being done permanently. We had questions after 22 about whether he was going to retire, but he said he was fine and he was healthy and looked great in 23. I had questions again after the concussions that ended his season prematurely in 24, but he says he's coming back. Behind him, Zach Wilson. Wilson, the best thing you can say is he has some experience. He started 33 games in 3 seasons for New York, but a career 57% completion percentage, 23 touchdowns, 25 interceptions. Not lighting the world on fire. I have questions like, if Tua was really lost for the year, would they go with Wilson? Did he learn? How much did he learn and grow with Sean Payton last year? We never saw him get into a game for Denver, so it's kind of hard to say. But we hardly saw Sam Darnold get into a game for the 49ers, and he came out and rolled out a great season, obviously showing some maturity and learning from a great quarterback system. I'll be curious to see Wilson in preseason. I thought he looked pretty good in preseason for Denver. I actually thought he would have been my pick to be the number 2 over Stidham last year based on what I saw in the preseason. So there's every possibility. I thought it was a good low landing spot for Ewers, but he has his own injury history from college. So, definitely questions there. Your number 10, you went with the Jaguars. I have them much lower. You must feel a little bit better about Trevor Lawrence.
So one thing you said that I take issue with is he's got a third coach trying to fix him. I don't think that the coaches, the only coach that needed to be fixed from was Urban Meyer. I think he's a plenty good NFL quarterback. He just needs the offensive coordinator and head coach to run a good offense around him. And does he make some mistakes? All NFL quarterbacks do. I think Trevor Lawrence has, he's got an NFL arm, and he's got all the tools you look for. He's mobile. But there's been times where the team around him has just been led dysfunctionally. I don't think Doug Peterson, I know I had high hopes Peterson was going to be this calming presence after Urban Meyer's tornado there. But ultimately, I think that what we saw from Doug Peterson was that as an NFL coach, he was kind of washed up. And, and then Lawrence suffered the injury. But for me, I think Liam Cohen is much kind of like Dave Canales, a little bit of a quarterback whisperer. And I think that with Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas, that we're going to see some really high level production from Trevor. That may, I could see a career year out of him.
Your number 9, you went with the Las Vegas Raiders. They traded for Geno Smith and signed him to an extension, presumably to be their starter for a few years. They still have Aiden O'Connell, who was a 4th-round pick in 23. They picked up Cam Miller in the 6th round of this year's draft, and they have college free agent from last year, Carter Bradley, on their roster.
Yeah, Gus Bradley's son. Yeah, I like Geno, and I think he's going to be fine. But we did see that his 3 years in Seattle, it isn't like the numbers got better every year. They're going to probably ride Ashton Genty quite heavily. They've got a pretty good offensive line. I think all in all, with Brock Bowers, Jacoby Myers, Jack Besh, I think they've got some weapons to get to the end of Geno Smith's contract in fine fashion. He's not an elevator. He's not a guy that's gonna put the team on his shoulders. He's gonna make some plays and he's gonna look good. He's gonna make some errors. He's a good NFL quarterback, not a great one. And he's 33 now?
Yeah, he's might be older than that. So you went with the Raiders. So you and I have the same teams at 8 and 9, but just a different take. Mine that I dropped to 9 that will cap this half is the New England Patriots. Obviously, they have Drake May as their starter. They picked up Josh Dobbs to be their number 2, and they signed college free agent Ben Woolridge. At this time last year, they had May, who was unproven, but they had a pretty solid veteran backup in Jacoby Brissett, and they had an interesting guy in Joe Milton. I think their room in general has taken a step back. I don't know if I see Woolridge making the final roster. I'll start with Dobbs. I know, the legend of Josh Dobbs was born under Mike Vrabel in Tennessee, but if you actually looked at the stats in those games he started, 58% completions, 411 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. They also lost both those games. He is only 3-12 as a starter. That legend of Josh Dobbs prompted him to become the starter in place of an injured Kyler Murray for 8 games in Arizona, where he went 1-7 and got traded to Minnesota to try to be their bridge when they lost Kirk Cousins, where he went 2-2 and ended up losing the job to Nick Mullins, who I think I charitably described as a homeless man's Jameis Winston. Dobbs has some experience. He started 15 NFL games, but I mentioned 3-12, only 17 touchdowns, 15 interceptions in those games, had a 62% completion percentage. It's not incredibly inspiring. I know why that Vrabel likes him, so I can see he got brought in there. But if you're talking to me about backup quarterbacks, that's not stunning. There were all kinds of problems with the 2024 New England Patriots, which I will grant you. But Drake May was solid, but not necessarily spectacular for them. 3-9 in 12 starts, completed 66.6% of his passes. That's pretty good. Only 2,200 yards in 12 starts. Not incredible. Again, they don't have the greatest receiving weapons. Spoiler alert for a few weeks from now when we're talking about AFC pass catchers, but I still don't think they have great passing game weapons. 15 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Not terrible. 34 sacks, quite a bit. They have worked on trying to improve the protection He did rush for 421 yards and a couple more touchdowns. I thought he was good. I think he has promise. We have him, in dynasty rankings, I have him pretty solidly upper half of QB2. I think there's potential, but when I looked at this room as a whole, I just liked the team I have it at 8 a little bit better. There are a couple of these where you and I have them like slightly reversed that I kind of felt were like coin flips, and you and I just flipped the coins a different way, I think.
Yeah. But I think Drake May has a ton of ability and potential. I think that Vrabel and the Patriots invested in building that team from the inside out around him. They used first and third round draft picks on offensive linemen. They went out and got a new center and a new right tackle in free agency, as well as bringing in a guard in free agency. They also spent a 7th rounder on an offensive lineman. So they decided, hey, we know that if we want to be successful, we got to protect this guy. Lots of suspects at wide receiver. When you go 9 deep, it gets scary there. They got an aging, coming off an injury, Stephon Diggs, who, as long as he's getting the ball, I think he's going to be happy, even if they're going, 9-8 or 8-9. Mac Hollins is going to, he'll walk in barefoot and fight you 10 out of 10 days. I love him. He's just not that good a wide receiver. Demario Douglas, nice slot guy, but, there's a ceiling there. I'd like to see they list Kyle Williams as the backup to Douglas, but he feels to me more like an outside guy. Kendrick Bourne came on, or not Kendrick Bourne, Kayshon Boutte came on last year, and he feels a little bit like a guy that played well because, well, who the hell else were they going to play? Somebody's got to be out there. So, but can he turn that around and build on that and maybe move past Mac Hollins or be the heir apparent to Stephon Diggs, who they list as the straight backup? Jalen Polk and Javon Baker were draft picks in 2024 that have a lot to prove. So it feels to me like we're getting a first round wide receiver draft pick next year in New England. If the class bears it in their spot.
I don't know.
Maybe they go sign a free agent stud.
They've tried to bring in free agents. People haven't wanted to go there. I think that's what they wanted. T. Higgins. They offered Chris Godwin more money than he got from Tampa Bay, and he was like, "I'm good." So,
because sometimes it's not about the money. I mean,
no, but I think they just haven't been. They are not the destination they were a couple of years ago.
I agree, and they have to build. They have to rebuild from the Mother Hubbard's bare cupboard Bill Belichick left him, and and let's face it, it takes a special kind of player to say, I'm going to come in and be the face without you having to force me to do it by being a draft pick. A lot of players, they don't want to go where they're going to have to spend 2 or 3 years on a rebuilding team at the beginning of their prime or as they're just heading into their prime. They want to go win that title. And so they're going to, I feel like that's why I feel like they're going to have to. But if they go out and win 8 or 9 games this year, play ugly, fight ugly, win ugly, the defense plays well, and Drake May, comes up clutch, Stevenson and Henderson are pounding it from the backfield. I could see some high-end players going, you know what, they really invested in that O-line last year, and it showed in the way Drake May played. Now we get a top-end free agent going there. Now they go out and they're able to draft, a first-round caliber wide receiver to come in there and be the alpha. Right now, I like Drake May. I have him, like you said, 1 spot up.
Yeah, you have them. We'll just go to 8
Drake May's potential.
Since you and I have the same top 7 teams, which we'll talk about on Friday. But your 8 was is the Patriots. My 8 is the Raiders. And the reason that I have the Raiders a little bit higher is honestly, first of all, I think Geno is do I think he's incredible? No, but I think he's a little underrated. 5 years in Seattle, 68.5% completion percentage, 12,961 yards, 76 touchdowns, 36 interceptions. I think he's just a solid veteran quarterback. I think with Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers, he probably has better receivers. And now he has Ashton Janty. He probably has better weapons than what they're going to be able to give Drake May, and a Clint Kubiak offense, I think will be good. And I think Geno kind of fits what they're trying to do. And honestly, I think Aiden O'Connell is a more inspiring number 2 than Josh Dobbs. Aiden O'Connell has started 17 career games, only 7-10. Dobbs, remember, was 3-9. He has thrown for more yardage in his games played than Dobbs in his career, 33,830, and a better touchdown to interception ratio, 20-11. I don't think either of them are incredible, but if I had to pick, I think I'd rather have Aiden O'Connell as my backup. And so
I would definitely rather.
That was
Aiden
what I
O'Connell.
gave. That was why I gave the Raiders. To me, like I said, it was kind of a coin flip. I was like, if we were doing dynasty rankings, I'm certainly going to have Drake May higher because of youth and potential upside. But where they are going into 25, I think I would take. And I'm no Raiders fan. I think I would take the Raiders room slightly over the Patriots.
I just think that the potential and ability of Drake May makes up for the potential and ability of Aiden O'Connell when you stack the 4 of them together. I think the third quarterback in New England isn't on the team yet.
I actually don't think either. No, I'm not.
Well, I can't hear you now.
I don't think either of these teams is going to carry a third quarterback. So,
I wonder if they can hear you or if they can't hear me. Because can you hear me?
That'll bring us to the end here. We will wrap up and sign off. That was the top half or the bottom half of the AFC quarterback room draw. So we actually went one higher, went to our number 8. Dennis and I have the same 7 teams that are going to be in there for the top half of the draw. When we look at that on Friday, we'll talk about our order and talk about that. We'll also talk more about if there are any fun scheduling highlights. I'm curious to see what the international games will be, which we should find out tomorrow. And after they announce the full NFL schedule, I may do my early playoff predictions and see, through the playoff machine to see who I think gets hosed on a playoff schedule attempt. But that'll do it for us today. Dennis, presumably you can hear me again. And if people have a lot of free time on their hands, what can they do?
Well, they're going to need to get us while they can because we got some time off coming up here. So go to your favorite podcast platform, hit that search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, give us a subscribe, give us a like. We're going to continue breaking down these position rooms. I forget what we got coming up after that. Is it team previews or some shit?
Yep, we start team previews, but so we're wrapping up AFC QB rooms this week. Then next week will be NFC QB rooms, followed by running back rooms, followed by AFC running back rooms, and then we will do NFC pass catchers, followed by AFC pass catchers, and that's receivers and tight ends because we like to challenge ourselves. But it does make a difference. A team could have mid wide receivers and an incredible tight end and have Brock Bowers, and maybe have vaulted up my list a little bit. But at the end of that, you have a pretty good idea of how we feel about these teams, and then we will start doing previews. We're going to do previews a little differently this year. We're going to do whole divisions together instead of first and a half part, partly because we're going to be taking some time off this summer. As Dennis mentioned, we'll be out for a week in June. We'll be out for a week at the beginning of July. So that'll be time. Hopefully you can catch up with your family as well. But we'll be back on Friday looking at our top 7 quarterback rooms in the AFC. Until then, you guys have a wonderful week and happy schedule release.